All right, all right, all right, all right, all right. Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Reflection and Projection for Sports podcast. This ain't no we're going to talk about four of the biggest things happening in sports. This ain't no episode where we have to conclude the podcast at a certain time. Nope. This is March. This is the time. This is the best time of the year. This is where the St. Peter's comes to life. The UMBC beating UVA comes to life. The Fairleigh Dickinson of 2023 knocking off Purdue comes to life. The Amir Aura Khan comes to life. One shining moment. That time where nets will be cut down, where history will be made. Guys, do you know what's really, really hard? Waiting for the real selection show to happen before you discuss predictions, seedings, and manually constructing your own bracket. Just to note, part of me thought, should I do this on Friday? Because that is normally when I do my podcasts. Or should I do this Sunday afternoon when we have a lot more reliable information? For me to do what I'm going to do today, that is reveal what I think the March Madness bracket will be and what it should be before 6 p.m. tonight. If I did this Friday, this podcast would become unreliable in the span of minutes. I know it's probably a good amount of parts are gonna be unreliable at the end of this podcast. We'd start the podcast with no final score from the Ohio State-Michigan Big Ten tournament game. We'd finish the podcast with a final score from that game. If you all understand where I'm going with this, you know exactly why Sunday is the right day to do this. Yes, I'm doing this now, but if I waited until 5:30 when every single game was over, I would only have 30 minutes to do this show because I want to watch the selection show myself and see how I did compared to the committee and experts. Yes, this still feels weird, sadly, not having Greg Gumbel on the show. I bet in 10 years from now, some of us will still be used to having Greg Gumbel on the selection show. The whole broadcasting community misses you deeply. And all right, let's get into this. As you listen to the show, please feel free to get a piece of paper and follow along by drawing out the bracket as we go. You can also track how many teams from each conference get in. Please, Lord, make sure we don't get 14 teams from the SEC this year. I highly doubt that's going to happen, but we never know what the committee has in their head. We will be back after this opening statement in just a few seconds for bracket number 1. Alrighty, folks, here we go. It is bracket number 1. And the selection show for the Simon Burt's Reflection and Projection for Sports podcast has begun. Obviously, as we get started here, please put in the chat if you guys can hear me okay. I know I've had to prepare a lot for this show. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. And with this being said, I think Duke will be the overall number 1 seed, looking like one of the main teams to keep your eye on this year, led by the very likely National Player of the Year, Cam Boozer, wins over Michigan, Florida, Michigan State. Not only that, taking care of business flat on out, regular season champs, conference tournament champs last night, and even without Caleb Foster, they could still win this entire tournament. Duke now in the bracket. I assume and believe that they will be scouting the first 4 matchup in the 16 spot between Howard and Lehigh. That's 2 solid teams right there. And the Patriot League champs of Lehigh University, ladies and gentlemen, the Mountain Hawks are dancing. That early to mid-February area, Lehigh didn't have the strong performances that they wanted, but going down the stretch, they got hot, and that's what matters. Getting it done in March. And Howard, the MEAC champs, making their 5th appearance in the NCAA tournament. So we will mark them down. I am also writing these things down as we go about because I want to know how many teams I have per conference. And now as we move back up into the next part of the bracket, we have the number 8 seed at Clemson. So Clemson, got to keep an eye on that defense for the Tigers, man. Those wins over SMU, Louisville, and then beating North Carolina in the ACC tournament, they have made me personally put them as an 8 as opposed to a 9. And that is the second team revealed in the ACC. And I know you guys are waiting for those SEC teams to flood your mind and get into the dance. I foresee Clemson's first round matchup against the Ohio State University at the 9 seed. A statement win against Purdue down the stretch. That is the type of win that catches the attention of everybody in the country. If Ohio State doesn't get that win over Purdue, I don't even know if they make the tournament, if I'm being totally real. So now let's go to the next part of the bracket as we now have the first SEC team. It is the Crimson Tide of Alabama. And Bama, one of the hardest non-conference strength of schedule in the country this year. In addition to SEC play, the non-conference gauntlet in St. John's, Purdue, Illinois, Gonzaga, Arizona, Maryland, Clemson, and Yale. Get all those teams in your head. You play all those teams in one season, add SEC play into it, and still go 23-8 to finish the regular season. You got to show some gratitude, especially after going 19-14 just 4 years ago. And if Bama is on upset watch, they will be facing a team that not very many people want to play, and that is High Point. They have looked incredibly impressive this year, might I say. I've got some stats to list off here for High Point. Not only making their second consecutive appearance and not only coming off a Big South championship, but averaging 90 points a game is High Point, making them 5th in the country in scoring offense and also 13th in the country in assists to turnover ratio as a factor to why their offense is so elite. Not only that, but High Point is 4th in the nation in turnovers forced per game. Also bringing a 14-game winning streak to this tournament. That is going to be an extremely tough team to face in this tournament. Let's go up to the team that gave the scare to the Gators, Vanderbilt, at the 4 seed. Vanderbilt knows how to win big games, ladies and gentlemen. They are currently competing for an SEC title against Arkansas in addition to the 8 quad 1 wins Vanderbilt had this regular season. So the main reason I have Vanderbilt as high as a 4 seed is not only because they beat Kentucky by 25, and not only because Tyler Tanner is playing like a beast on both sides of the floor, but that win, like I said, in the SEC tournament against Florida really speaks to their potential and have made me move the Commodores from a 5 to a 4 seed. And here we go. Not on the March Madness watch a ton, but now after winning their conference championship in the Missouri Valley, and that is Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa Vanderbilt can be a good game, and might I say, Northern Iowa looked amazing throughout that Missouri Valley tournament. Also, number 1 scoring defense, in the country. Opponents nearly averaging 60 points per game against them throughout the season. And then the Panthers winning 10 of their last 14 games coming into the tournament is a solid attention getter for the committee. And so after that matchup, that is the second team in the SEC. And we now go to the bottom half of the East region bracket, where Tennessee is the number 6 seed. Rick Barnes making it 30 appearances as a coach in the NCAA tournament. Congrats to him. He has to be one of the more impressive coaches in the country, especially from a consistency standpoint. Despite only 1 appearance in the Final Four so far. Let's see if he changes that this year. The odds are definitely against him there, but it's March, and the unexpected happens when we least expect it. All right, guys. Okay. Now, we've been waiting for this one. Okay. So, now, let's go into the team that everybody has been talking about. Let's go to Miami, Ohio as an 11 seed. Here we go, folks. It's Miami, Ohio, only the 8th team to have a perfect regular season since 1978-79, back when Alcorn State did it. Well, and some discussions throughout the last couple of weeks, people like Bruce Pearl believe Miami, Ohio should be a bubble team, and eventually they end up losing to UMass in the quarterfinals Thursday. But the bottom line is the player's performance determines whether or not they have earned a spot in the NCAA tournament. As the coach chooses the schedule and not the players, 31-0 throughout the regular season. I mean, that's all the players can do. I mean, come on now. It's like that's all the players can do is try to win every single game. I'm not quite sure if they have what it takes to advance in the big dance. But the other thing to mention is that with the recent bracket that came out just about an hour or so ago, has Miami, Ohio as a last 4 in team, which I think is extremely interesting. And I totally disagree with that. Even though strength of schedule is a key factor along with the quad 1 record, I still think Miami, Ohio bypasses the first 4. And now let's go to the next matchup where the 3 seed is Illinois. That's the second Big Ten team. It's going to be Illinois. So here, Illinois, when we talk about a team that can score the basketball, Illinois is who comes to my mind this year. You know, whoever ends up playing against the Fighting Illini, whoever ends up playing them, you've got to bring your A game defensively. I mean, that's non-negotiable. Illinois averaged 81.8 points per game in the regular season this year. That, I think, is going to be a key stat that stands out, and I really think that they are going to be a tough team to play against in the tournament. And, here we go. In come the Big Sky champs of Idaho at the 14 spot, beating the Montana Grizzlies on Wednesday and punching their first ticket to the NCAA tournament since 1990. That is a huge, huge moment right there, and a long time coming, of course, for the Vandals. And now we've got two more matchups in the Eastern bracket. We now have Kentucky at the 7 spot, ladies and gentlemen. Kentucky under Mark Pope, 2 big wins against Tennessee and a win against Arkansas and Vanderbilt this year. And like I said, it's his second year as the head man, and I think that's going to be a good team to play against. Kentucky lately in the tournament has been up and down, and we just never know what happens with them. And I assume that they will be playing TCU. That is going to be a good matchup for them. TCU, David Punch, a fun player to watch on the basketball court, ladies and gentlemen, knows how to steal the ball, knows how to play in transition, and makes his team a competitive one to match up against in the tournament. And so here we go. And now we have the 2 seed. Here we go. Let's see if they are going to win the Big Ten tournament this year. It is the Purdue Boilermakers. And like I said, they're going to face Michigan later today in the Big Ten tournament. And Purdue, okay, 3rd best offense in the country. Braden Smith, one of the best passers in the country by a landslide. They beat Alabama. They beat Texas Tech by 30. They beat Auburn by 28. And they beat Nebraska in overtime. Jack Benner and Fletcher Lawyer on a given night will torch you from the perimeter. I think this is going to be an extremely tough team to stop. And Purdue is going to face Tennessee State. First NCAA tournament appearance for the Tigers since 1994 out of the Ohio Valley Conference. Winning 9 of your last 10 games going into the tournament is exactly how you put the committee on notice. Let's talk about this real quick. We've got some solid matchups here. All right, so before we take a quick break, obviously Alabama and High Point, that sticks out to me because High Point is extremely talented in terms of the one bid league team, the one bid leagues. I think out of all those, High Point is the most impressive team. We're gonna bring McNeese up eventually, and because they're in another bracket. So, and then Alabama, they have a high octane offense, especially this year and last year. And also that strength of schedule. And Bama did lose to Ole Miss by a point in the SEC tournament, but there's going to be potentially a lot of talk about the fact that some of these key losses by big teams in the conference tournament could be waking them up to be able to perform and execute better than they thought they would, or they originally would. And unfortunately, that will take us to break for the next couple minutes or so. We will be back for the next bracket in just a moment. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, for the second segment of the March Madness podcast. Here we go. Now, let's go to the Midwest, where Michigan is the overall number 1 seed for this bracket. That's going to be number 1 seed number 2 here in this tournament. They have impressed me this year, have the Wolverines. Yaxel Lendeborg, arguably one of the best players in the country, and the buzzer beater he had and the game winner he had speaks to his execution. And this is Michigan's first time ever as a 1 seed. They could win it all if they win the way they have been throughout the year. And so right now, after saying that, I presume that Michigan will be scouting the first 4 matchup between Prairie View and LIU. So Prairie View A&M came in hot after that win against Bethune-Cookman in the Southwestern Athletic Conference quarterfinal, and then bested Southern University for the conference title, punching their ticket to the big dance. And yes, welcome back to the NCAA tournament, LIU. That is a key team right there, winning their 7th ever NEC title. Congrats on punching your ticket to the big dance, guys. And let's keep going. We're going to go now to the 8 spot, where Villanova is going to be your 8 seed. Yes, the powerhouse is back. Well, Jay Wright isn't there anymore, but the Wildcats are back where they want to be in the NCAA tournament. It is March. Yes, they are an 8 seed, but we cannot know for sure if they pull another Chris Jenkins 10 years later. We shall have to see. And their first round matchup, I presume, will be the Knights of UCF at that 9 spot. A 5-6 quad 1 record this year with wins over Kansas, Texas Tech, and BYU. This is going to be a tough team to play against. I think UCF and Villanova is going to be watch TV for many people outside of the Villanova and UCF community. All right, let's keep going. And for just a second, I'm going to update my bracket. That's 16 at Prairie View. Haven't heard of them a ton. They're in the SWAC. All right, so here we go. At the 5 seed, we have John Calipari and Arkansas. Woo! Ole Miss gave them a scare in the SEC semifinals yesterday. Now, we have yet to know if they will win the SEC title. Now, the Razorbacks going into the tournament under SEC Player of the Year and SEC Freshman of the Year, Darius Acuff. What a tough player on the court. He is fun to watch, might I say. And John Calipari, of course, still doing Calipari things in college basketball. And their first matchup will be against the Zips of Akron at the 12 spot. And that is yes, 2 MAC teams in the tournament. The Akron Zips with Tavari Johnson. He is a standout player for this team, and frankly so, I have a message for you guys after I reveal the final 12-5 matchup. Let's keep going. And now, let's go to the next part, and we are going to reveal now the 5th team in the Big Ten, and that is Nebraska at the 4 spot. I have loved watching the Cornhuskers throughout the season. They defend at an extremely high level. They're 9-5 in quad 1 games, and they are going to be a tough team to play against in the tournament. Might I say, back in the regular season, watching that game against Michigan. That was a tough game and just absolutely a fun one to watch. And now let's go to the 13 seed, and that is California Baptist, the WAC champs, making their first trip to the NCAA tournament, beating Utah Valley last night. And now let's go to the bottom part of the second bracket, where the 6th seed is the Wisconsin Badgers in the Big Ten. That is 6 teams now in the Big Ten, ladies and gentlemen. They had a big win over Michigan earlier in the season. Man, that win over Michigan State by 21 was impressive as well. And, Wisconsin, they score at a high level, and their 25th appearance in the NCAA tournament in the last 28 seasons. Extremely impressive for the Badgers. Let's see if they make a run. However, they are going to be scouting the first 4 matchup between Mizzou and VCU. Yep, in the Atlantic 10. And Mizzou, they spent a little bit of time as a team not bypassing the first 4. However, they got wins over Florida, Vanderbilt, and Tennessee, which clearly, in my opinion, puts them past the last 4 in category. However, now, as of yesterday, the committee has them back in the last 4 in category, apparently. I am not sure if I can make a bracket as opposed to just picking who wins when they come out all with one little brain here. Y'all, I promise. I'm trying to get these all as accurate as possible. I can guarantee you by 6 p.m. this is not going to be 100% correct, but I will say that the fun and entertainment of this show is what exactly should stick out to you. And that is, ladies and gentlemen, Mizzou, for your curiosity, that is 6 teams in the SEC. Mizzou VCU could be a good game, knowing that especially if VCU comes out of Sunday today with an Atlantic 10 title over Dayton. So now the next matchup is going to be UVA at a 3 seed. How about that? All right. And UVA, they were so close to winning the ACC title, trying to inch back closer to their 2019 selves once again. UVA, after a few seasons of not finishing where they want to, being lower seeded on the bubble, potentially a last 4 in team, now they are back to, I think this year, I really think they're a 3 seed considering how impressive they were in the ACC tournament. So now, and their first matchup, I think, will be Troy, the champs of the Sun Belt. Gave Kentucky a dogfight in the round of 64 last year. If they end up like my bracket prediction is right now, and they play UVA, it might be a bit of a different story. However, might I say, we've seen 14-3 upsets before. I kid you not. We've seen them before. Oakland, Kentucky. That was an upset. Jack Golke back in 2024. That was a heck of a game right there. Now let's go down to the 7 seed, where it is the Iowa Hawkeyes. And yep, even though they lost a bunch of games this year, did the Hawkeyes, quite a few of their top 10 matchups were decided by 6 or fewer points. That shows that they're going to compete with almost anyone in the country. And their first matchup will be against Texas A&M at the 10 spot. 4th best team in the SEC this year. Obviously, they would want to be a higher seed than a 10, but this is where I have them this year. Rashawn Ajee, a fun player to watch. And now let's go to the 2 spot. Here we go, folks. It is Dan Hurley and UConn. They are an impressive team this year, but however, a quad 3 loss in there, losing at Marquette. And Dan Hurley, that the animated dude he is, getting that crazy ejection. Even though this happened earlier in the year, UConn, they beat Florida in St. John's. They got a 27-4 record to end the regular season. You know, putting that all together gives them that nod as a 2 seed. And their first round matchup will be against Furman. The Paladins are back. Clearly, East Tennessee was the favorite for the longest time in the SoCon Conference, but now Furman makes their return for the first time after that legendary win over UVA 3 years ago, thanks to JP Pegues for allowing the iconic Kevin Harlan for making one of the greatest calls in March Madness history. Let's look at some of these matchups here real quick. We've got a good one in Iowa, Texas A&M, and in out of the middle of nowhere, I think Akron, Arkansas could have people on the edge of their seats. That could be a really, really good game to watch. And Furman, let's see if they do it again. I mean, UConn hasn't been at their hottest stretch lately. And as much as you would think UConn Furman, if you see that on your bracket, you would, as much as you think that is a non-negotiable, oh yeah, UConn's going to win this. I fear that if that is a matchup, I really do think that that could take some critical thinking, because Furman in March Madness against UVA, I mean, that really sticks out. I mean, St. Peter's did what they did in 2022, which stunned everybody. And now Furman, what they did last year was absolutely incredible. And now we're going to send it to break. And after this short break, we will be coming back for the third segment of the show and the third bracket. All right, ladies and gentlemen, during this break, I'm just keeping up with the Yale and Penn game. It is currently in overtime, and Penn could win, which would mid-show have to change my whole entire bracket, which would be kind of wild. So, yes, we are back for the third bracket here on the show, where Arizona gets the nod as being the third overall #1 seed, second to last undefeated team in the country, regular season champs, conference tournament champs. Braden Burries has been a heck of a player to watch, and also going in under Big 12 Player of the Year, Jaden Bradley, and the buzzer beater against Iowa State as well. However, with Arizona's recent history in the tournament, we never know when the clock strikes midnight on them. But this year, I mean, their resume being one of these 6 teams with 30-plus wins, a top 5 team in both offense and defense, I think they can make a run knowing how impressive they have been this season. And the 16 seed for this bracket playing against Arizona will be the Darlings of 2018, UMBC. Uh-oh, the Retrievers are back, ladies and gentlemen. They did it once. Let's see if they do it again. First appearance since the first ever 16-1 upset, that miraculous upset over UVA back in 2018, having the college basketball world absolutely stunned to their hearts, sinking and breaking the hearts of the UVA community specifically. And congrats to the Retrievers for winning their conference. So now let's go to the 8-9 matchup, where I have NC State. Will Wade back in the NCAA tournament after that wild upset against Clemson last year with McNeese. And this year, his first year in a Power 5 conference school. This is the ACC, ladies and gentlemen. He gets a win against Clemson again, loses to Kansas by 1, and gets that massive win over Carolina a month ago, making them a solid 8 seed in this tournament. And their opponent, I presume, will be UCLA, another Big Ten team that is now 8 teams in the conference. They are a team, is UCLA, that comes in and out. A win over Purdue, Illinois, and Nebraska. And that statement win in the Big Ten tournament against Michigan State stuck out to me and said, put them at a 9 as opposed to a 10 seed. And so now, let's go to the next matchup where this could get a little interesting. As we now have, you ready for this one? North Carolina at the 5 spot under Caleb Wilson, who is one of the top picks in this upcoming draft, projected to be one of the top picks in this upcoming draft. However, he recently suffered a broken right thumb on practice last week, ruling him out for the remainder of the season, which makes me think that Carolina will go down in either maybe the first, second, or third round. We just do not know of the tournament this year. And speaking of early exits, if UNC is on upset watch, here we go. It is McNeese at the 12 seed. Dominant win for the Cowboys on Wednesday. Even though Stephen F. Austin breezed through conference play, McNeese was the clear favorite in this conference championship game. Oh, wait a minute. Oh boy. Ho ho. Amir Orakan is back. The viral student manager from last season with the boombox and apparent hazard suit he wore. Not sure what the suit was all about. I thought that was hilarious. Just looking at that video, just doing and jamming away with that boombox, just doing what he does, hoping that McNeese goes to the Sweet 16 this year after their second round loss to Purdue. So now let's go down to the 4 spot where a big name is coming out, y'all. It's Rick Pitino in St. John's in the Big East. second season under the one and only Rick Pitino. This is his 26th appearance in the NCAA tournament. He continues to impress regardless of the school he's at. And second consecutive conference tournament champs last night, taking down Dan Hurley and UConn. And does he make it 8 Final Four appearances this season? Oh, y'all, only time's gonna tell. Rick Pitino has always been an impressive coach. It's just taking so many different schools to the tournament. And look who is now come in the tournament right now. It is Hawaii. Yeah, the Big West champs. That's a huge deal for them. First time in a decade punching their ticket to the big dance. Big win over UC Irvine last night, knocking them off of the expert bracket after being on there for the longest time. Now let's go down to the second half of this third bracket, where Louisville will be the next seeding, number 6 seed. That is going to be 6 teams in the ACC. And Louisville, let's talk about them for a minute. A consistent top 25 team this year, mainly just with how efficient and effective that offensive unit can be. Some people might put Louisville as a 5 seed this year. Others could, put them at a 6-2. But I, however, have Louisville as a 6. And it could be either way. Could be either a 5 or a 6. We just don't know. I think a 5 or a 6 seed would be a good spot for the Cardinals, as they will be scouting this first 4 matchup between SMU and Texas. And guys, as we speak, SMU is going to be super nervous watching the selection show tonight. Second round loss in the ACC tournament to Louisville Wednesday. I could totally be wrong, but if I'm SMU, I'm freaking out a little bit. I know they're right now on the last 4 in panel, but still, when you're on the bubble like that, the committee, you never know what they're doing. They could always make last-minute changes. And then we've got Texas in the SEC, an up-and-down team. And let's go to the next matchup, where the Zags, another one of the teams with a 30-plus win season in the WCC. And we're going to get more into them later. The WCC, I have them as a 3-bid league. And might I say, Gonzaga, guys, that defense makes me quite starstruck. Might I say. These guys are super physical, and they're, quote, kills for defensive stops, along with the efficiency defensively from in front of the perimeter. And Graham Ike, double-digit rebounds 13 times, and Innocente and Diagne, conference tournament champs as well. That's going to be an extremely tough team to stop, knowing that defense wins these big games. Gonzaga will be playing against Wright State. Wright State, the Horizon League champs, making their first appearance since 2022 and looking to advance to the round of 32 for the first time in program history. And now the 7 seed is going to be the next WCC team. And it's going to be St. Mary's, California. Even though they lost in the WCC semifinal Monday night, they are still a fierce top 25 team and stick out team. However, my worry is with St. Mary's, that them in quad 1 games, not only with that 1-3 record, but their only quad 1 opponent in non-conference was Vanderbilt. And so, and I really think that St. Mary's, they could be a second round upset. They could be a third or fourth round upset. Or even a first. We cannot know for sure. And they will be facing, in my opinion, a very familiar foe, the Santa Clara. And at the 10 spot, Santa Clara, that win over St. Mary's in the semifinal really said something. You know, Santa Clara is a really tough team to play against. How about 3 teams in the WCC this year and significantly bypassing the first 4 round on all cylinders? And here we go. Let's go to the 2 seed, where Tom Izzo and Michigan State. That is now 9 teams in the Big Ten. And Michigan State, top 10 in defense this year, 16th toughest schedule in the country, and also Jeremy Fears, one of, if not the best playmakers in the country. For this prediction, I think this is the second consecutive year for the Spartans being a 2 seed. I'm pretty sure they're going to be a 2 seed this year, and Tom Izzo still doing Tom Izzo things as an iconic coach in college basketball. So now going to the 15 seed. How about Saturday night? Kennesaw State coming in, the Owls winning the Conference USA tournament over Louisiana Tech. Jaden Harris, the senior from Atlanta, Georgia, coming up huge off the bench. And now, before we go back to break, let's look at the teams from this third bracket. I could see NC State, UCLA, yet another 8-9 game being pretty interesting. And if McNeese and Carolina end up playing each other, I would be picking the Cowboys in that one. You know, North Carolina, a little skeptical. They don't have Caleb Wilson. And, you know, McNeese is a hot team. They know how to play basketball, and they are just an amazing team, especially after dominating Stephen F. Austin. And St. Mary's, California, if they end up playing Santa Clara, would that be a must-watch TV for me? I mean, that not only that, but those 2 teams know each other. They've played each other quite a few times this year. And also, let's go to let's go to the Arizona UMBC game. Now you're probably, I don't know, you're probably rolling your eyes at me and like, you really think Arizona's going to lose to UMBC? UMBC has had that moment that really sparked them back in 2018, but I still really think Arizona takes that one. I think Arizona's going to make a deep run this year. So yeah, let's take a minute or two, or I don't know, let's just go to break and get this final bracket in just a moment. Alrighty, folks. Now 3 brackets down, and we are going to the final bracket where Florida is the overall number 1 seed for the 4th bracket. They are a strong candidate for back-to-back titles, regular season champs, huge wins versus Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky really make you come to that conclusion thinking they will be a high seed in the tournament. Not only that, but looking like one of the most dominant teams in the country as of late, despite the loss against Vanderbilt yesterday. I think that loss wakes them up a bit. And with that being said, Florida, in my opinion, I think Florida could be my pick to win and go back-to-back in March Madness. And here we've got an interesting thing, little story that I'm going to tell you between this next one, and it is Queens. Yeah, congrats to the Royals, man. Queens, this is a life-changing moment for them. First NCAA tournament appearance as a D1 school, now going into the conference tournament. They knew they had to beat both Austin Peay and Central Arkansas to get that auto bid. And Queens, just as a kid who's got a lot of family down in Charlotte, North Carolina, every time I went to the gym to play basketball with my grandpa and going out to the lake when I was like 3, 4, 5 years old to throw rocks, every single time we go there at Freedom Park, we drove by Queens University. And when I got older and got more interested in college basketball, I was like, ooh, I wonder if this small school here is going to get in the tournament. And here they are as a 16 seed out of the ASUN Conference. And that will bring us to the next game at the 8 and 9. Georgia is going to be that number 8 seed, and that is now, 10 teams in the SEC. Second straight year in the tournament for the fellas from Athens. Each year, the SEC in basketball is clearly growing that much more. At least we're not going to have 14 teams from the SEC this year, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. You know, those spots will most likely be replaced by ACC and Big Ten teams that missed the tournament last year. And their 9 seed is going to be out of the Mountain West. It will be Utah State. And Utah State, I've got the Aggies, from the Mountain West as a 9 this year. A significant win against Memphis, who had the 5th toughest non-conference schedule this season. And then, of course, winning the Mountain West Championship last night. Congrats to those guys out of the Mountain West. All right, here we go. Let's go down to the next matchup. And I said I was going to say something after I reveal this matchup, where the 5 seed out of the Big 12 is going to be Grant McCasland and Texas Tech. And this is what you call an athletic team. You know, got that win against Duke. Big win at Arizona. Wins against BYU, Houston, and Iowa State. However, my concern with Texas Tech is them being JT Toppinless. I fear that these guys will get knocked out early because of Toppin's torn ACL. However, guys like Leon Horner and Donovan Atwell, who's a fierce shooter, by the way, can make big plays and big-time moments. I'm curious to see how far they go. And with that being said, we're going to look back and see who won the Ivy League championship. And it was Penn. My bracket had Yale the entire time. My prediction here, it is going to be Penn at the 12 spot after beating Yale in overtime. Out of curiosity, I wrote down my bracket, printed it out, and wrote the teams down in a Sharpie marker. And now I will have to cross out Yale and put Penn there. Congrats to them. That's going to be a huge win going down the stretch in this tournament. There, Texas Tech and Penn. And the thing that I was going to say is now, after all the 5-12s we have mentioned, from Alabama High Point, UNC McNeese, Arkansas Akron, and then Texas Tech and Penn. So the first two, I believe that half of those 5-12 matchups are on upset watch. I thought Texas Tech, Yale for sure. If Yale was going to be in there, I thought Texas Tech would be on upset watch. But I really don't know if Penn would come out with a win against a powerful Texas Tech team like they are. And like I said earlier, these things change in a matter of minutes. And now let's keep going, where the 4 seed is the Jayhawks. Bill Self and the Jayhawks making it 36 consecutive seasons in the Big Dance. And that is going to be 5 teams from the Big 12s. You know, the Jayhawks, guys, they had some super impressive wins, but also some incredibly unnecessary losses. However, when you are comparing the two categories of stupid losses and crazy wins, the impressive wins are what get you to be the seed that you are. And also, Darren Peterson, projected as one of the top picks in the NBA draft, however, has publicly stated that he is unsure that he will declare after his freshman campaign. And with that being said, they are going to play the CAA champs of Hofstra, making their first trip since 2001, now finally proving to COVID-19 how rude it was to steal their opportunity back in 2020 after being projected to be a 14 seed 6 years ago. Now let's go down to the second half of the bracket, where it will be BYU. The Cougars, they have looked amazing at times. And under one of the top draft prospects in the country, AJ Dybantsa, a really fun player to watch, leading the country in points per game. However, quite a few bad losses, but some super impressive wins, such as beating Iowa State and Texas Tech. However, the amount of losses they had specifically down the stretch puts them, in my opinion, as low as a 6. And their opponent, okay, this one could get a little interesting. South Florida is going to be the 11 seed, as they soon will be competing for the American Conference Championship against Wichita State in a couple of hours. They had a pretty solid non-conference schedule, might I say. South Florida, they can compete with almost anyone in the country. 2 quad 1 wins, specifically those wins over Tulsa and Memphis, were huge, in addition to that massive win against Utah State back in early December. And they almost beat Alabama as well. Only lost that game by 11 points. They had one of the tougher schedules in the country this year. One of the reasons why they are in this tournament. And yes, if Wichita State wins this game today, it does knock off South Florida, knowing that this is not a two-bid league. All right. And we've now got 3 more matchups to mention. We have the 3 seed at Iowa State. That makes it 8 teams in the Big 12. Had a number 1 seed in my books for quite a while, but have gone down a couple seeds. But on the optimistic side, their defense is in a great position to really stand out in the tournament. All right. So now the 14 seed at North Dakota State, the Summit League champs, making their first appearance since 2019. Congrats to the Bison. And here we go at the 7th spot. We have Miami, Florida under Jay Lucas. Another ACC team. That makes it 8 in that conference. Miami is a tough team this year, ladies and gentlemen, might I say, getting a win against Carolina and going neck to neck with UVA in the ACC tournament gets them that 7th spot. All right, so, and then at the 10 seed at St. Louis, the Billikens, a special season they had under A10 Player of the Year, Robbie Avila. Some of you are probably wondering why I have St. Louis at a 10 seed as opposed to an 8 or 9. In addition to their loss against Dayton yesterday, I find it kind of difficult finding, a particular win that the Billikens had that really stuck out to me. Like hear me out here, guys. They 0 ranked opponents on their schedule, despite being a ranked team for a significant part of the year. However, they are the number 1 team in the country in field goal percentage defense. Opponents are only shooting roughly 37 to 38% from 3 against them. And that's where they could stand out in this tournament. However, they've got a tough opponent in Miami in the Hurricanes. That would most likely be a win for Miami if that comes about. And then we have Kelvin Sampson and the Houston Cougars. And that is going to be 8 teams in the Big 12. Defense is as strong as always. Top 5 in that category like usual. They fell in the title game against Florida last year. Fell in the conference title game against Arizona last night. Let's see if they rebound this year. Always a candidate to win the whole thing. These are losses that can really wake a team up, I promise you. And last but not least, we have the MAAC tournament champs, Siena. So here we go, going to the big dance for the first time since 2010. Even though they didn't have the best February, they got hot in March, and as a result, they are in, and getting hot in March is always what matters. So, that is 4 brackets down. As you guys know, you guys can watch this show. Please do so. And then I will be watching the selection show tonight and the remaining conference tournament championship games. And we are going to see how I did with my bracket when the experts in Clark Kellogg and all those guys and Jay Wright reveal officially what the matchups are in the 2026 NCAA tournament. All right. Thank you all for listening. That was a lot of information I just threw at you. And if you followed along, I'm really, really happy that you did. And that sadly concludes this show. We thank you all for tuning in. And we, on the next podcast back in the studio, I didn't think to mention that, but we were not in the studio today because it is spring break right now. But for my next show, I will be back in the studio and will most likely be talking about some of these games that we talked about today, if they are the matchups. Also, could be going over some women's games too and other sports as well. Thank you all for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. And this is Simon Burtz saying so long from the Reflection and Projection for Sports podcast.